Hi everyone, I'm Frank Clifford of the London School of Astrology. This is a series of interviews with expert astrologers to discover how they interpret and approach client work and how they actually prioritize, synthesize, and interpret birth charts. We'll also discover how they go about communicating that information to their clients. Each session will introduce the astrologer's approach, and then we'll be looking at a chart or two with them to see this approach in practice. Each master astrologer is giving their time for an important cause, and the LSA is donating £150 per session to the charity selected by the astrologer. Our guest today, Adrian Ross Duncan, has chosen Crisis, the UK charity that helps the homeless. So let me introduce you to Adrian. Adrian Duncan began studying astrology in India and in the UK in the 1970s, becoming a full-time consultant in 1985. He is perhaps best known for his books Doing Time on Planet Earth, one of my personal favorites, and Astrology, Empowerment and Transformation, again, another favorite that I recommend to students, and of course for creating World of Wisdom astrology software and writing interpretation programs for that software. World of Wisdom, astrowow.com, is hugely popular and is available in a dozen languages. Wow, I just learned that today when I was doing some research on you, Adrian. Adrian currently lives in Copenhagen and continues to work with clients. So a warm welcome, Adrian. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much. And just to update on that, I've actually moved to this beautiful little town, like a fishing village in the island of Bornholm, which is in the middle of the Baltic Sea, and it's so nice, and I can see the sea from here, and it's great.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. That's
Yeah,
great. Okay, so
yeah,
I need to update that. Okay.
yeah.
Now, obviously, you do a lot of different things in your work. What would you
Yeah.
say the percentage of your time is divided between writing, developing software, client work? Is it different each week, or is there a general theme?
Yes. I write sun signs as well, which is basically to attract people to my side, and I kind of that's a real discipline. I have to do that almost every day, and it's quite hard work. But it's still only 20 hours a month, so that's quite a hard work. But it's actually quite interesting, quite fun. Uh, it really I use the principles of horary astrology really to do sun signs, and I try to make it as accurate as possible. Then I'll have sort of not so many consultations these days, maybe 15 a month, maybe, on average, and sometimes I squash them together in a week period, and then I'm doing all this development work, which kills me, and I'm using like Indian programmers and that, so dealing with these remote programmers is like really you have to be so careful, especially with Indian programmers, because unless you specify very, very precisely what you want, you're gonna get something else, so that takes up, so it's about an equal, I would say, 30% on each of those things: development, clients, writing.
I have a lot of respect for people who do sun sign columns because on one end of it, it feels it can be terribly repetitive, and another, it's a huge discipline. I learned how to really conceptualize and condense my work when I was writing them.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you use horary methods. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have very strong feelings about sun signs. I mean, I think that you have to really know what's going on around you at that very day or every moment. And as what I would basically do is that if it's an Aries, I'll put Aries on the ascendant, equal house horoscope, and check out what's happening to Mars as the ruler. And Mars has got a whole history at the moment. For example, it's like going stationary, moving square Saturn, well, 3 times. Well, actually only square Saturn twice, and then Saturn moves sign, and this is like a kind of narrative. So that narrative I'll include in the sort of daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly sun signs. And on a daily basis, I'll sort of integrate where the moon is, so it kind of alleviates or accentuates the basic themes happening. and I don't. I'd love to have a kind of survey really about how sun sign people felt, but I think it's underestimated really the power of sun signs.
I think so, particularly if you're looking at the ruler and
Yeah,
watching that. So you're a storyteller in that way, looking ahead and
yeah, yes, very much. We're looking, where it's been, where it is now, where it's going. That's astrology for me.
now thinking back to the 70s, the 80s, as you're developing your practice, moving in full time in the mid 80s, who were the people around influencing the way that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
saw
Well,
astrology?
I thank you. Yeah, so I actually, when I went to India at the age of 21, um, I was, just a hippie, right? And I, I had made my girlfriend pregnant actually, and so I was wandering around India thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be a father, and he was going to be an Aquarius. And I thought, wow, it's almost like Aquarius was born in me. It was like an amazing experience. And so, long story short, he was born in India. We went back to North Wales, and it was a very isolated area. I never met anybody who could teach me any astrology. So I just read some books. But I found this book in Delhi when I was 21 by Alan Leo, Astrology for All, which totally entranced me, and that was the beginning of astrology. And then later, when I was about 29, 30, I moved to Copenhagen with my Danish wife. And it's kind of odd story because it was very spontaneous. I mean, I moved from one day to the next, and we never came back to Wales. And when we arrived in Copenhagen, I said to my wife, I said, okay, I couldn't read any Danish. I said, okay, anybody offering houses to rent? And she said, oh yeah, lots. And I said, okay, show me one. And she rang, and the guy said, oh, there's hundreds of people have rung. And I said, just say we'll take it. And so she said, we'll take it. We got the house. We landed in the house. And after a few days, a letter came in the door with an astrological zodiac on. And I asked my wife to read it to me. And it was the foreman, the president of the Astrological Society, who just moved out of the house. So I moved in the same house, and I became president of that society later on. Anyway, there was visitors to Copenhagen. There was Derek Appleby, which was great with horary astrology. There was Noel Till, quite a character, and but basically the people who inspired me were some great Danish astrologers. Some of the best horary practitioners I ever met and still are. And we were a group and we shared experiences, and it was really fantastic for me.
When you think about client work and what you might say to a client before you begin, is there anything that you want to convey to them about what to expect, what you do, what you don't do? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I recently, in the last few years, I've started to start by saying that there's, by comparing the horoscope to a map of the London Underground. It's like brilliant for navigating London, but it doesn't really say anything about London itself. And I say that to the client that they know the territory, the London territory, and I have a map. So I'm trying to tell them that this has to be a dialogue. The more details I'm going to get from them, the more I can understand the map, and then together we're going to answer every question that comes up during the consultation. So I kind of engage them initially in the idea of a dialogue.
And do you talk to them about forecasting, prediction? How do you phrase that? What
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer in prediction. I think astrology is made for prediction. Nothing else is. Nothing else like you can study easily. So I'm, but I also think that you can't predict something a client doesn't want, you know. I think that the clients are kind of got a feeling for what's going to happen. So I engage the client in the prediction process. You know, I say, well, what options have you got? You know, what do you think? And then they'll come up with a couple of options, and then I'll kind of talk about the advantage of the obvious astrological option. You know, so I'm trying to get them to embrace an empowering future. And examining anything that might be sabotaging that their ability to get there, you know. So I'm mostly, when clients come, especially when they come repeatedly, I'm looking at the current situation and the future developments over the next year. I find it quite challenging because you don't want to kind of I also want to make some kind of psychological insights happen, and there's a kind of slight, you know, dissonance between prediction and psychological insight, and I'm trying to kind of merge those two things, which is a challenge, because sometimes, you know, if you kind of go too far into predictive stuff without engaging the client, then the astrology, the horoscope, the consultation doesn't proceed so well. It's a balance, I think.
So are you trying to get them to actively participate in the possible transits, progressions, etc., or do they come away feeling like things are going to happen anyway? How do you?
Yeah, right. I want to avoid that one. You know, that feeling. No, I'm saying that they're masters of their fate. I don't care if they are or they're not, but I want to sell them the idea that they're masters of their fate. You know, and that at any moment, with the help of conscious action, they can guide their fate the way they want. You know, but basically the way they want in the horoscope. You know, so. All they have to do is to be true to themselves in a way and overcome their concerns, I think.
And do you do much preparation before? I know we always over prepare when we begin.
Yeah. Well, I did when I began. Jesus, I prepared like 10 hours, and I wrote these like 10-page things by hand before. That was like in the 80s, you know. But today, I've actually started doing more preparation than I used to. You know, I kind of got it down to about half an hour. Now I do about 40 minutes, but it's very intense, and maybe even an hour. You know, it's very, very intense. I know more about that person's horoscope than my own by the time I'm finished with it. You know, I've looked at everything that I think. You know, so I'm actually really pretty well prepared. You know. As prepared as I can be, in my opinion.
And we're going to look at some examples in the second half, but yeah, we could talk about the consultation chart a little bit later. But my feeling is, if you're preparing for that, do you prepare for that too? Or what if they're late? If they're too early, how do you cope?
Yeah. Oh, it's a bit. If they're late, I have to do the consultation chart again, you know. But actually, what I've been doing these days, I've been doing it on PowerPoint, because I've been traveling around a lot, and I spent some time in Nepal recently, and a half a year on Malta and stuff, you know. So I've had a bit of a disruptive period, and done so a lot of things by Skype, and you know, so. And I found out, and even my accounts and everything, it's all online. So online, I don't have any paper, so I started doing it. All the horoscopes are in a PowerPoint presentation, which I actually find much more convenient than having it on paper, because I can quickly, you know how it is with, you know, you've got different charts and you're shuffling the charts and that. And now I kind of get it. I avoid that completely. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, actually.
Oh no, I was curious about that, because it sounds like you do a huge amount of preparation, and then people can come along and turn that upside down by turning up late.
Okay, yeah. But you know, normally people, if it's 5 or 10 minutes late, it's not going to affect my consultation chart very much. I take it into account mentally, you know. If it's like really late, then I might just do a new one. So it's not going to mess me up very much if they're late.
Okay.
And you know what they say, you know, especially if you work with consultation charts, nobody's ever late. You know, they always come at the perfect time.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Looking back, how would you? That's an interesting question in some ways, and maybe it's putting you on the spot a little bit. But if you were to sum up what you feel astrology is, or what you do as an astrologer, what would that sound like?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and it's not really putting me on the spot. It's something I think about an awful lot. You know, I'm fascinated by repudiations of astrology. You know, and skeptics and people who've got arguments against it and that. My brother's a real skeptic. You know, so I can practice on him and stuff. Yeah, the justification of it's like well, first of all, it's like a wonderful instrument. Astrology is a wonderful system for you know, understanding what's going on here and now. It's completely integrated with events around you at every moment in time, so you're really living in the moment. That's a great thing. The second thing is that your experience of reality, you know, the outside world, is totally modified by you know, all your sensory systems, or five senses, and that's already totally modifying experience of the outside world. But then on top of that, you've got all the kind of conditioning and the psychological issues, you know, which completely you know, make you interpret experience through different kinds of filters. And the horoscope is this wonderful presentation of the precise filters for all the sensory experiences that come in. So you're not experiencing reality as reality is. You're obviously experiencing it, you know, through a very, very personalized lens. So, you know, every planet like Jupiter is so much connected with your opinions about what's right and what's wrong, and you're always sorting right, wrong, you know. Venus is always like what you like and what you don't like, so you say, oh, don't like that, you know. It's very personal. Oh, love that, you know. So it's just like, what tool can do that? I mean, trained psychologists are really, really good at doing this, but they still don't have, and they're very good at helping people, but they still don't have this diagnostic instrument, you know. Does that answer some of that question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And what I find as well is that you really don't know what people have done with their horoscopes, with those tools, and you don't know whether.
No, you don't. Yeah, it's always, it can be a surprise, right?
Yeah, it can be, but also you may have somebody very Uranian who's been born into a family of Neptunians or Saturnian people, and it takes longer to maybe access certain aspects of who they are.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating because you never quite, you can see it and you will always hear it in hindsight, won't you? But
yeah, that's right. It's so easy in hindsight, but to actually do things blind, you know, to describe how people are without having an experience of those people, it's really difficult, you know. So,
and I don't know how useful it is as well. It's more of a testing thing.
yeah, it's a difficult thing. Yeah.
So the program, World of Wisdom, the books, the consultations, is there anything that if you look back and you could write the first line of your own obituary, is there anything you particularly want to be remembered for all the different things you've done over the years? Or is that still to come?
Yeah, I think it's bringing astrology to as many people as possible, in you know, as simply as possible, in as many languages as possible. You know, bringing the magic of astrology into their lives in a way that's understandable without them having to study astrology, I think, necessarily.
Right. Well, that's the key to this modern age, isn't it? People don't want to spend 10 years learning it. They want to dip in and see how it applies to them.
Yes, I'm always trying to devise a way, you know, a way of making it. It's so difficult, really, to make something, a system that people you know, like I've devised an app. I've built a great app, you know, which interprets people's horoscopes and that. And I'm always thinking, how can you make this simple? You know, it's a huge challenge actually, because the you know, translating astrology is like, well, that's what we're trying to do.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Okay, so in the next part, we're going to be looking at some charts with you. But in the meantime, thanks for being here, Adrian. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we're going to have a